Welcome to today's SharePoint Shop Talk. I'm so happy to see everyone joining us. We are looking forward to a great conversation today, all about SharePoint. And I am continuously making everyone panelists who's joining us, so bear with me while I do that. My name is Jamie Wright. I hope to run the SharePoint Shop Talk community. We have our website, which is SharePointShopTalk.com. We're also on Twitter at SBShopTalk, and the organizers are at Alcovis, New York City. We also have a Facebook account, and we have groups on LinkedIn as well, so you can check us out there. SharePoint Shop Talk is organized by Alcovis. Alcovis are SharePoint experts and search specialists, Microsoft Gold certified partners, and virtual technology solutions professionals. You can email Alcovis if you have any questions about SharePoint and search anytime at info@alcovis.com and tweet to us at Alcovis, New York City. So without further ado, we're going to start introducing the panelists. So starting with John. John White is with us, and he's a SharePoint MVP, and I would like to welcome him. Hello, John. Are you there?
I am very much here. Yeah, thanks very much, Jamise. As you mentioned, yeah, I'm a SharePoint MVP and a SQL VTS out of well, just outside of Toronto, Ontario. Co-founder of a company called Unlimited Viz, which focuses in on SharePoint and in particular business intelligence work. So speaking at SharePoint Saturday on Saturday, so looking forward to that, just getting ready for that right now, and man, do I ever hate practicing. Getting ready for that, and WPC, which is also being held in Toronto this year, so if anybody's going there, look me up, say hi.
Excellent. Oh, good luck with that. I was practicing, and I know that all the attendees appreciate those who practice, so that you can give a great presentation with no hiccups.
Unfortunately, it's necessary.
Yes. Next up, we have Jim Adcock, who should have been on the call. That's the panels that I was waiting for. I don't think he's able to join us yet, but I just wanted to let you know a little bit about Jim. He just joined our panel recently, and he has just given us a presentation last week about SharePoint governance, so that was really nice. And we hope that we'll see him on shortly. Next up, we also have Peter Ward, who's on the call. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Jamie. How are you?
I'm fine.
Very good. So good to be on the call. I'm calling in from New York City, so I'm the co-founder of Soho Dragon Solutions. We do a lot of SharePoint stuff. In fact, that's all we do, SharePoint. So we're good to be participating in this talk shop. I hope everyone's enjoying the weather.
Yes, the hot weather, and also enjoying, I want to hope everybody had a great July 4th as well yesterday. Thanks, Peter. And we also have Laura Rogers, who's with us today. Hi, Laura.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Laura Rogers. I live in Birmingham, Alabama. Here's my information, my books and stuff, and I'll be speaking at SP TechCon February 22nd through 25th in Boston, which will be a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing y'all there. Is anybody on the call going to SP TechCon?
Did you say February? Did you say February?
Yes, did I say February? Yeah, no, I meant July.
I was going to say, wow, they've booked you up that far.
Also in February too, so I'm thinking way ahead. No, I don't know when in February it's going to be, but it's in July, in a couple of weeks. That's not the first time I've done that. So is anybody going?
I think Sandy said she's going.
Oh, yeah, Sandy, cool. I'll see you again there. Okay, so I'll be doing 5 sessions there. That'll be pretty intense, and then I'll be hanging out in the Rackspace booth and signing books and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then, of course, everybody should be signing up for SPC in November, right? That'll be very
All right. Don't miss that one.
Laura, are you speaking at the SharePoint Saturday in New York?
No.
Later. Okay.
That'll be a fun one, but, you know, I travel as little as possible, so I couldn't really justify that one to my family. I have small children. I'm going to be going off to New York again. Like, not so cool. That's about it for me.
Thank you so much, Laura, and please check out her books. She's always helping hand around InfoPack, InfoPath and InfoPath, and as well as solutions out of the box. So next up, we have some congratulations in order. I have changed Paul Lennox's screenshot here. He's now a SharePoint MVP. And I just want to say congratulations and thank you so much for always sharing your knowledge with the SharePoint crew here. So Paul, say hello to the group.
All right. Hey everyone, thanks Jimmy. So I appreciate it. I'm proud to be among the ranks of some very smart people who with a lot of spare time and share all their experiences and travel around and speak. And just a little bit about me. I work for a service organization called Arcovis in New York City, and we specialize in everything SharePoint and specifically enterprise search a lot right now. And I've been dedicated to SharePoint since about 2006, and I work with Fast Search for SharePoint just about every day these days, and I've been doing that since the beta release of that.
All right. So, without further ado, let's start out with our questions that we have for today. Just trying to get from the panel, what are your favorite free third-party parts available to the community that you're using now? Peter, I know that you...
Sure. My ones are Bamboo Solutions have got the weather and time zones. So everyone wants that on an intranet. You know, so that's free, so you can't go too far wrong. It's easy to configure. You can throw in your time zones. That's actually.
I probably see that at about 3/4 of the sites I run into.
Yeah, but it's it's a good web. It's a good web part.
I would add a lot of Christopher Humboldt stuff. What do you call them now? User managed solutions, but in particular, I use Easy Tabs on a lot of different projects, and it's a little solution that lets you roll up a bunch of web parts in a single zone into a sort of tabbed look and feel, so you can save a lot of real estate and provide a lot of information on a page.
Another free, well, it's not so much web, it's not a web part, but actually I was on Codeplex. They've actually got a log reader. So generally on every client site I go to, I download that, and it is save it on the desktop, and it allows you to actually slice and dice the information in the SharePoint logs particularly well.
You're talking
ULS log viewer, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
There's John. There's one I almost always install depending on the type of site, but the search master page adapters for search, Nick Hadley has them. They're on Codeplex as well. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you set up a search center, typically the chrome around it is all very different from the site, and if you wanted to unify that with the main site, you can use these things to do it.
Someone wanted, John, they wanted you to repeat that again, I believe.
Oh, sure. There's it's a Codeplex project called the SharePoint 2010 Master Page Adapters for Search. And the reason you'd want to use them if you're using publishing and you're using custom master pages, or even the V4 master pages, when you set up a search center site and you go there, you lose all of the navigation and the standard site chroming. It uses the minimal master page, and if you want to use the V4 master page or a custom master page that you're using, there are problems with doing that. Just try it if you're running the out-of-the-box stuff. But if you install it, basically, if you turn on the features that Nick here has on Codeplex, it works. You can use standard master pages with your search center.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to let everybody know that Jim Adcock just came on, and I've unmuted him. If you wanted to say hello to the group, Jim.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so that's great. That's great advice and tools for people to use as a third-party web part. And so the next question, this is interesting. What is best, AD Authentication or forms? And I guess before we even get into what is best, I was hoping that someone can give a quick overview of the two choices. Do it.
Because if somebody wants to jump in, I'll do it. So this is Paul. So AD is obviously an LDAP source to manage all of your internal users, and it's what most enterprises use to manage their users and their passwords and their properties, and you can add extended properties and stuff like that. But in the context of this conversation, we're saying that it allows the network and any applications that are running in the network to know who's using it, who's logged in at the moment. Forms authentication is a little bit different. It has its own back-end storage of names, properties, and passwords. And the reason it's called forms is because the user would have to type their name into a form and click submit, and then it gets authenticated in the back end, and you get authenticated that way. I don't think that there's an answer to which is best. I think it's which is applicable to the situation. And primarily, if you're in an AD shop, you're going to want to use AD authentication because it's easy. You can suck in all of your users into your user profile, store very easily. Authentication and authorization happen automatically, and it makes everything easy. Where you would use forms, typically where I see people using forms is if AD isn't available for some reason. So a lot of times that's an extranet situation. If an organization doesn't want to extend their AD or a separate AD for external users like partners or something like that, they'll probably set up forms. There's a lot of other reasons you might do it too, but that's a pretty typical one. The other one that I see is if somebody has a hosted SharePoint environment and they didn't want to set up ADFS or something like that to extend their domain to wherever their environment's being hosted, then they might use forms even though they're inside of an enterprise. So anybody can jump in and tell me all the wrong things I said now.
That was good. I mean, this is Peter. That was good, Paul. A couple of things I'll just add. The forms authentication, the IDs and passwords are saved in a SQL database. With AD, as Paul quite rightly said, it's like when you're using users within your organization. And what you can also do is, if you have external users, you could actually set up a local domain users for external users. So therefore, those users are coming in, they're logging in with a local domain rather than your domain which is going across the organization.
Yeah, I'd also just throw in there that it's not an either-or decision. You're typically going to be using a mixture. If you're going to be using AD as a base pretty typically, and then you might be extending out to forms.
So there would be no time where you would just use forms authentication without AD.
Paul mentioned one, and I think that's totally valid.
Okay. And then if you were to use anonymous, that's like for public-facing sites only. Is that right?
Typically, yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to go back up to the previous question real fast because Sandy just informed us about a free tool from Lightning Tools. Sandy, are you there? I don't know if you wanted to share it on the phone.
Yep,
but,
yeah, I am.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that we do have a free version of our, I mean, it's normally a paid third-party web part, but we have a free version that's a little more limited, but I think it would still be pretty useful if you aren't trying to roll up across site collections. That's its main limitation. But you still get all the column formatting and stuff that you can't really get in the content query web part.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and she has the link to that web part there in the chat window. All right, so that's great. Speaking of public-facing sites, well, that was a little bit before, But another question that comes up very often is, what are the challenges of public-facing SharePoint websites? And yeah, just kind of like dig your teeth into that. I'm sure there's so many. Well, can we start with the anonymous authentication? Is that something that is hard to do, or something that
It's John here. It's easy enough to do. You lose certain features. In my realm, one of the things is reporting services doesn't work with an anonymous site, so that may not be applicable to a public-facing website. But whenever you're dealing with that sort of situation, you're going to be giving up features, and knowing what those features are, it can be pretty challenging. We did early on in 2007. We actually did one of these for a very big charity here in Canada, and learned a few lessons along the way. We don't make this a primary part of our business, but one of the big things is, if you're going to be doing a public-facing website, one of the design goals typically is to lock everything down from a SharePoint standpoint. So everything for the anonymous user is going to be read-only. That doesn't have to be the case, but that is typically going to be the case. And when you're doing that, you lose an awful lot of the things you tend to take for granted with SharePoint from a collaboration standpoint. Things like, if you wanted to stand up a blog, the ability to comment doesn't really work so well. You have to do handstands to get that sort of thing working. So you wind up building exactly. And by the way, when you have a publishing site, you're typically going to use the View Forum Pages lockdown feature, which means public users don't have access to source content, to lists. So if you want to just see a list, you're not going to be able to do that. They typically have access to just pages. So you have to adapt yourself to putting making all of your content available via a page. Once you get your head around that, it's not so bad, but it can be a little weird. In the case of the charity, we had to build some web parts that would internally connect backs to let users end users feed things back, including donations, back into back-end systems. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth of it anyway.
What I'll just jump in. Obviously, with an internal intranet, you can control like the displays and the browsers. Like, you know what, everybody's using 800 by 1200, and everyone's using IE8. Now, suddenly, when you're going to the public domain, you've got no control whatsoever. If people are using Firefox, Safari, Chrome, different versions. So if you're using complicated JavaScript or dynamic HTML, then you really need to accommodate your display to be accommodating like Safari and Apple, and then obviously now the Android. Anyone or the Android or the iPhone, or the Windows Mobile. Obviously now, with everyone having their email signature with their website and looking at their emails on their phones, they're clicking on those links. And so that's a challenge, particularly with SharePoint, because you start needing to have to make configuration changes for the browser to work on the mobile device as well as the PC screen. So one of the things which, like views which are categorized, they have a bit of a challenge in the Safari browser. That's just one thing that doesn't generally work.
And we also have a question, we actually have 2 questions, but the first one came from Daniel.
I was at a presentation the other day regarding it's actually an intranet, as it happens. It was a widely used intranet, and they mentioned this a SharePoint cache, and I know that there's certain web parts that can use it for searching, cross-site searching, but one of the best practices for typically public-facing sites when you want to present information, static information, in a fast way. Is there people know about this?
Are you talking about the blob cache, Daniel?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Yeah, for publishing sites in particular, but basically anytime you've got content like an image in your images library, it's not something you can really configure through the SharePoint UI. It's an IIS thing. You need to make some. Well, you could do a solution, but you make some web config changes, and essentially, as these artifacts get used, they get dumped out onto the file system, so they can be served up directly to the client.
Rather than content database, yeah.
Yeah, without having to go back to the SQL server all the time. That's okay. What it is. Yeah.
Is there any other cache used? Because I know there's a cache used for web parts, for cross-site searches. Is people use that? Things like rolling up content.
Yeah. I'm no expert on that one.
Okay. I was looking at the internals of Content Query web part, and that's got a caching object inside it as well. And believe me, I don't want to look at the internals of the Content Query web part, but I'm having to.
Yeah. There's also the there's caching from a publishing standpoint. You can set up various cache profiles. I don't know the mechanics of, internally, but basically, if you've got a you can set up pages to behave a certain way, and basically, it's a question of how long does the cache persist before it gets updated.
Yeah.
Before we relook at it. So in a collab site, you wouldn't cache anywhere near as much as you would in a static publishing site, but I don't have the.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. We have another question that came in from Bunny. And Daniel, if you could just mute your phone again. It says, we looked at claims-based authentication. One of our biggest concerns was the people picker. It changes in appearance functionality after going to claims. An unpleasant surprise is that anything entered into the claim-based people picker appears to resolve. How do people typically address this? Can't say people picker.
Unfortunately, it's the way it is.
Oh. Okay.
It's also the future.
Got it.
But
Someone wanted to know. Yes?
Let me just. Does that actually make sense? Does that make sense? Because the people picker is pulling information out of AD, and because of the authentication process, it can't get a handle properly on AD.
No, it's pulling from every source. That's the difference, right? So it's got its own UI. You're not seeing the standard AD people picker. You're seeing the new. You know, like if people haven't been using claims, you actually are, because central admin uses it. So if you're adding anything in the service applications, you're seeing the claims type people picker, and it gathers from all of the possible authentication mechanisms that you're using. I guess I'd throw in one possible way to address it is to look at the multi-tenancy if you're worried about isolating one group of users from another. But that's a whole other can of worms. I wouldn't go there unless I absolutely had to in 2010.
Hi, this is Bonnie Springer. You asked a question. When you say, unfortunately, it's the future, can you elaborate on that? Because we have a lot of concerns about that.
So do I.
Our biggest concern was that people, if they're thinking that they're setting permissions correctly and they have like a typo in a name, they could end up not getting the result that they were hoping for. I mean, there's no indication at all that what you've entered is not valid information. So
well, there should be. When you say that it resolves, I'm assuming your problem was you've got people in multiple authentication. You don't know if you're picking the right one, but that might not be your problem.
No. Our problem was that you could enter anything in that people picker after it switches to claims, and it puts the underline under it as though it's actually resolved.
I haven't seen that, so sorry. No, I can't comment on it.
Okay.
I don't think it should behave that way, no.
But your earlier response was, unfortunately, that's...
Yeah, no, I misunderstood your question.
Okay.
No, that new UI, my comment about that's the future, is claims is probably the future. I mean, when they're calling NT authentication classic, that's the writing on the wall there. But
so the future of the UI is it's going to be exceptionally ugly.
Well, I would expect to see claims across the board more so going down the road, and therefore that type of a UI. For example, in Office 365, that is the UI. It only uses the claims interface. But no, it shouldn't. I don't think it should behave that way.
Because in the research that we did, there was an indication that actually that's the way it works out of the box, that it will resolve anything. and that there are ways around it, but it's definitely not easy to do.
Wow, okay. My experience is primarily through Central Admin, and I haven't seen that, but I could be dead wrong.
Okay. Thank you.
Well.
All right. Anything else around public-facing SharePoint sites that you've come across in terms of challenges before we move on? All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Oops.
I would throw in that's a pretty deep subject. I mean, it's certainly more than you could cover right here, but if you're talking about using SharePoint as an internet, so, I mean, there's one thing to say it's public-facing, but to say you want it to be your internet site, there's a lot of stuff that people who are experts in this do to make SharePoint optimized for the web. So I think I would dig pretty deep. You know, there's everything from SEO to having really long links to dealing with all the nuances of having anonymous users and then having people administrate it, and like Peter said, dealing with all the browsers. But it's a pretty long list, and there are people who have really strong opinions about it who have written on it. So I would, you know, approach that as its own big giant subject that you'd have to tackle.
Cool. Yeah, I think we should do that. Thanks a lot, Paul. So I'm always looking for big topics that we can cover for the whole session, so that's a good idea.
As long as I don't have to do it, I'm happy to.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, this is one that you probably do have to do. It's your question. It's what is a service farm, and when do we need one?
Right. So that's the concept of a services farm, and it speaks to the service application architecture, which I'm pretty sure everybody on the call is familiar with, but it's a way to make, it's sort of the replacement and modularization of the old SSP. So you have service applications for different things like search and Excel services and the user profile service. And in a lot of cases, it could make sense to have a farm that's just dedicated to hosting those services. And you'll see this in large enterprises a lot. And it's something, because I focus on search a lot, it's something that I've set up for people specifically with search. So I guess the next question is what is a good, what is a common scenario when it becomes a good idea? And so one case would be where, for whatever reason, your organization has multiple farms that they use, and that automatically, right then, I'm thinking a services farm, because if you want to share your My Sites and user profiles and stuff like that, then you're going to be sharing them across those two farms. So you're going one of your farms is going to publish that service application, the other one's going to be a consumer or a child of that. That doesn't mean that the service farm has to be dedicated, but it starts to get into sharing those across farms. And then having a dedicated one speaks to more about resource usage, right? So farms that have a particular utilization profile, so things that are very intense on resources, then it makes a lot of sense to isolate that within its own farm. So, and search happens to be one of those, because you're doing a lot of crawling. If you have a lot of querying, I mean, that's a lot of action happening on your hardware.
Cool. Any questions around that for Paul, or comments? Thanks a lot, Paul.
Yep. There's some, by the way, there's some really good articles on that in TechNet as well. There are, they lay out a lot of scenarios, and they have good diagrams of how they suggest breaking them apart, and which ones would be smart to cohabitate on the same farm and that sort of thing. So I would check out TechNet if you want to dive into that more.
Cool. This question here is very general, but I think it's a valid question to bring to this group. There's so much community content on the web about SharePoint. How do we know who to trust
It's a good question.
Me. Just me.
Problem solved.
That's hilarious.
It is.
I guess you could just only read TechNet. That would be very limiting, though.
And boring.
I think so. When I remember when I started working with SharePoint, and I guess like everybody else, I had to suffer through that same challenge. And I started a little bit earlier. So I think that it was less of a flooded market.
Yes.
I could say that to start with, you can pretty quickly identify who are the people that have been around for a while and who a lot of people consider to be an expert, right? So, for instance, anybody who's done anything with SharePoint administration or upgrade or anything has heard of Joel Olson, and that's because he's been around for a while and people consider him to be a definitive resource. And you can just figure that out. I mean, there's no tried and true way, but you'll just see a lot of people referencing back to the same thing. His queries will come up really high. Or for instance, or another example, if you Googled or Binged, I guess, user profile service, Spence Harbor is probably come up super high, right? And he's a definitive source. So I would say, to begin with, kind of figure that out, which is obvious, and then try to hit those blogs versus then going on discussion boards. Because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble just going on some discussion board and firing a PowerShell command that some guy, said to run. And then I think beyond that, it's a matter of not trusting stuff and really finding corroboration before you sort of execute on something. So if you do find something in a discussion board somewhere, don't take it obviously as at face value and go and kind of see if you can see other people that seem smart doing the same things, right? And I guess the last thing I'd say with that is also just kind of get familiar with what is going to leave you in support by Microsoft, right? So anything that's encouraging you to do something that's going to leave you in an unsupported state is a big red flag to me.
Anything that's got custom code to me is a big red flag. I'm just kidding.
Paul nailed it. I think that's about right. Even the good discussion boards can be questionable if you look at the blogs are typically there because people want to either reference things for their own purposes moving forward or share their stuff versus forums which have the MSDN forums, for example, have a point system and there's a ton of people in there that are just trying to gather points. So it gets a little noisy sometimes in my opinion in there. Not that I avoid them completely, but
when I'm going to look and figure out how to do something, when I Bing it or whatever, I be sure just be sure and read several different blogs or references about that one thing. And one person might say, well, you just do this, 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 and the other one I would say, well, if you did this, 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 like the other person said, then this could happen, but you might want to try this. So you just have to read, and that has to do with any subject, not just SharePoint.
And look at the posting date too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like where I used to work.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work at a healthcare company, and they literally blocked all blogs because they said it was a liability because it's healthcare and these are physical therapists, and they didn't want physical therapists just going and Googling stuff and just go and buy something they read in a blog and going and treating patients that way. So they blocked them from being able to read blogs. That was interesting. I don't know if that's still in place there, but yeah, because blogs are that way, just in general, in any kind of blog.
Yeah, anybody can produce them.
I think Laura's hit the nail there in terms of check multiple, sources. I've often tried to research something, and then I looked at it on 2 or 3 blogs, and I realised, well, wait a minute, there's contradictory, steps here, and some people are saying do it this way, some people are saying don't do it that way. So that's the key thing. It's almost like the cross-reference it, and also we've all got like this whole inner circle of co-workers and friends. Speak to those guys as well.
any go-to, well, I know you already said Joe Orson, Paul, but any other go-to blogs other than Laura that people normally use?
Spence's is fantastic. I like Todd Smith's as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yay, Todd.
Yeah.
And Todd's got that SharePoint admin netcast he does every Monday night. That's very useful for those admin types.
To throw a plug for that, that is fantastic because you can, he basically throws out all of the stuff he's bumped into in the previous week, and if you can hear about it, you can avoid things down the road. I love that. That's a fantastic resource. He's also got the builds page, which is a great resource. It's a nice centralized place to go and get, if you want to get your farm up to a particular cumulative update, you can go to his blog and get everything you need to do that.
I really want to thank you guys for that advice because it is very crowded on the internet scene, especially in SharePoint, and even if looking at Twitter and things like that. So that was very good advice. Thanks, guys. Here we go. So here's another new little thing that we're going to try to do. Sometimes the panelist has questions for another panelist, and I'm going to let Paul ask this question to John that he had.
Oh, right. I asked this question. I mean, it kind of is pretty straightforward, but as somebody who would operate in that space and such, I'm very familiar with what the tools are. But I'm curious, who's calling you to do these things, and what kind of projects are they, and what are the scope are they, and like why would somebody? What is the profile of a company that would seek you out versus, somebody who is more of a generalist, I guess?
Well, someone who was crazy, I think. I don't know. But I really wish there was a typical. It would make my life a whole lot easier. There's an awful lot of one-offs. I guess there's the people who have done BI in the past, and we're fixing it for them. That's one side of it. There's people who have convoluted ERP systems and need to get more value out of that. That's another profile. And then there's people that we're trying to convince that they can get more people out of their more value out of their data by bringing it into SharePoint. The BI is, in my opinion, incredibly underdeveloped out there. Most people don't even know that they have the tools that they have. I mean, when you get SQL Server, you have a premier BI platform, and in a lot of cases, I shouldn't say all you have to do is turn it on. Yes, that's true. All you have to do is turn it on from a tool standpoint, but it can be fairly daunting if you haven't taken that approach before. I mean, most people think reporting is taking a tool like Crystal and pointing it at a source data warehouse, trying to figure out what all the fields are, and producing a report on a page where a proper BI solution is going to likely involve at least some kind of data warehousing, if not multidimensional cube design. And traditionally, the multidimensional cube design has been daunting. So there's an awful lot of doing it for them. There's a little bit of training them. Typically, the new stuff in 2012, and we've just done our first major production implementation of that using the tabular mode of analysis services, which for anyone who's unfamiliar with it on the call is a way of taking the multidimensional aspects of a data cube and kind of demystifying it. And at the end of the day, what it is Power Pivot on a server. Not the SharePoint server, but on an analysis services server, which means it's more scalable, easier to manage, and that sort of thing. And the Power Pivot approach, the in Excel approach, that Power View thing that if you were on it a few weeks ago, I was running through, is an attempt to democratize BI a little bit. So I think it's going to get a little bit easier. I think it's certainly a trending topic. I'm probably way off of your question at this point, but are there particular verticals, I guess, that tend to request the functionality? Not so much verticals, but people use an ERP. They tend to, because ERP reporting tools tend to, frankly, suck. And reporting services is quite frankly really, really strong, and you can deliver that, what they need in a nice, friendlier interface via reporting services and SharePoint together. SharePoint is a fantastic vehicle for deploying BI. That's why I get excited about it. How's that for an answer? I think I talked around it enough anyway.
I like it.
John, let me ask a question here. Like, generally large multinationals, such as Procter & Gamble and Unilever, their ERP system is going to be more like SAP and Oracle.
Yep.
So, therefore, the data is not in SQL.
That's okay.
Doesn't that make it a bit more challenging? But also in terms of, well, are the SharePoint BI or the Microsoft BI tools scalable into that, or are people generally looking at the, should we say, things like Hyperion? That's what I found in terms of these big companies which are using SAP, Oracle. Their BI tools are more Hyperion rather than Microsoft.
Well, you know, anytime I have to deal with Oracle, it's going to be more challenging. It's just, you know, one of the lines about Oracle is, well, it may be expensive, but it is hard to use. It's a pain, right? But the Microsoft tools are fantastic because one of the first things you're going to do is some kind of a data warehouse. And from a scalability standpoint, SQL is as good, if not better, than most of them, quite frankly. SQL Server is brilliant. A lot of people don't understand that. There's a lot of FUD out there, fear, uncertainty, and doubt out there about it because it wasn't always the case. But it's certainly more secure than Oracle as from that standpoint. Now, Hyperion, you know, all of those are very, very specialty BIs. Now, BI's been around like forever. And it's always been the realm of those analysts in the back room. And those tools certainly continue, Cognos, those tools all certainly continue to exist, and they are there. And they tend to have, you know, in those large organizations, because they were typically the only ones who could afford that sort of approach. They're well entrenched. So I doubt very much that they're not going anywhere. I think you bump into more of a business issue than a technical issue. I mean, SQL, the first thing you're going to do is pull the data out of whatever source system you have, whether it's Oracle, whether it's whether it's DB2 or whatever that may be, and you'll pull it somewhere, and that data warehouse, if you're using the Microsoft tools, is probably going to be SQL. And from there, you do whatever reporting you want on it. So it doesn't so much matter what the source systems are, but you may have resistance within the IT shops to implement, you know, a Microsoft platform when they aren't a Microsoft shop, and they just may want to use their own tools from a familiarity standpoint. But I don't think there's a technical barrier at all.
Do you see? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is Kevin Graham. I've just got a quick question on that with the Oracle and Microsoft Server integration. Have you done anything with using the, say, reporting engines and stuff in SQL Server where you actually query, you know, from SharePoint to SQL Server for the reporting engine tool, but then behind the scenes you're connecting SQL Server to, say, Oracle as a data provider?
That's typical. Now, if you're asking me if we do it pass-through, we typically wouldn't do that, although you can. You certainly can. I try not to do that. It's just easier not to.
Have you seen performance issues with doing the pass-through approach?
Don't do it enough to really be able to comment upon it.
Okay.
But when you're doing that, what you're doing is effectively because if you're using reporting services and you're using like a proxy account, it's the server doing the querying. So as long as the pipe between the server and you know, whatever Oracle backend system is fine, then you're fine. You'd be installing like the Oracle, whatever you need to have to connect to Oracle or whatever the backend system is. You're gonna make sure that's available on the server. We just did one with Postgres. Actually, this was the Power Pivot one I was talking about. They have a Postgres backend. We're warehousing it just from a frankly a stability standpoint and a separation of concerns standpoint. But we're able to connect straight up to Postgres at one point.
So do you have any personal preference in terms of doing the pass-through versus, say, replicating the data over from Oracle into SQL Server?
Replicate the data.
Okay.
Use it, and basically that's a data warehouse approach, right? You use a tool like SQL Server Integration Services to move that data, and the best part about that is you'll transform it into a format that's going to support what you're doing with it. Yeah, typically the back-end systems are going to be designed for transactional usage. They're highly relational. They're designed for doing what they're doing. There's, you know, a whole bunch of different tables. If you're going to be reporting on it, you're going to want to dump that into a data warehouse that's going to be designed around tabular style reporting, so flatten the data out to support the reporting. Or if you want to support a multidimensional analysis, you might want to bring it into something like a star or snowflake schema or some mixture of the two to support that, pulling into a cube and doing the analysis that way. So there is no right answer to it, but I do like to separate those concerns, get the data, because there's all kinds of good reasons. It's kind of fun. I'm doing a presentation on Saturdays about this a little bit. So, but if you're pulling that data across periodically, those queries, when you're doing the reporting, if you were reporting it directly against that back-end system, you're impacting that back-end system. So if you're going to be reporting against these highly relational or highly transactional type of systems, you're going to be putting a big load on them when you're running these reports, and that's going to impact the people, the source systems that are using it as well. From a security standpoint, you only need to grab access to the data warehouse, not the source system database. So there's a lot of good news around doing it that way. So that proxy account, maybe it only has access to the data warehouse. It itself can't reach into the back end, to the original back end system. Just that process that does the converting of the data can. So there's lots of good reasons to warehouse your data.
Good, thanks.
No problem.
I wonder if I could just ask one more thing. This is Paul again. I'm just curious about this. I run into scenarios where a particular feature, like search or something, will drive an adoption of SharePoint. And I'm wondering, do you ever see that somebody wants SharePoint's BI capabilities and that drove the installation take-up of SharePoint in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll typically, we've had that a couple of cases where that got into a question about workflow. So they're bringing in information from their back-end system, but their back-end system might not have had all of the information they needed. So SharePoint, well, we could just throw that in the SharePoint list, and we need to add an approval to that. And as those kind of features get exposed to the customer, they can start to say, oh, we can do this with them. It's one thing to stand up and say, hey, this SharePoint's brilliant because it does all these things, but when they actually see it, it's a whole different animal.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Great discussion there, guys.
I'll get off my soapbox.